And so I want to go to now the church. Let's go to the church,
Oh,
because the church is perfectly acceptable to be gay if you're the music minister. It's perfectly acceptable to be gay-ish if you are a part of the choir. If your musical talents are allowed to be used to open up the doorway, the pathways, the portals between man and divinity. And in that space, it's okay. So long as we don't talk about it, so long as you're not open about it, and we're not going to be out about it, and no one.
so long as your gifts are what we experience, not you as the gift. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Come on. So if that is the case, and I have been wrestling with this because I've been speaking in a lot of churches recently, because everybody now want to talk about Project 2025. I was talking about it for over a year, but now everybody want to talk about it. Everybody want to talk about the harm that's coming and this, that, and the other. And one of the things that's clear for me is that we are not going to be able to make it through this current era with this thing that's coming with just pure intellectual discourse, intellectually masturbative discourse. We're simply not going to be able to survive, let alone thrive in this moment. It is going to, from my perspective, have to require a real internal grappling with all of the things that, access to whiteness allowed a lot of us to avoid navigating and dealing with. A lot of things that we didn't have to, we knew were there. We knew we had disparities and we knew all these things, but those of us who have success, we would donate. We would have an each one teach one approach. And now we're in an era where it's like, nah, them doorways to what we defined as access are going to be slammed shut in a lot of faces. And we are going to be forced to deal with things that we have been able to sort of dance around for far too long as a pathway towards healing. For me, and I don't know how you feel about this, so just let me know if you how this lands for you. There is never going to be, particularly in this era, an opportunity for us to grapple with what we need to grapple with, heal how we need to heal, restore the village, and gain some sense of Kujichagulia self-sustainability and independence if we do not get this right. If we are still willing to sacrifice those people who ancestrally have served as the doorways, as the portal between humankind and divinity, there is not going to be any healing or coming back from this moment if we don't get that right. And at the same time, I'm talking in churches where they are still of a perspective that sacrificing the LGBTQIA plus community is a part of their religious obligation. I was speaking with a member of my own family, very Christian conservative, who ain't met a trans person to date, but has a real issue with pronouns. And I said, well, now did something happen at work? Like, did you misgender somebody and then you had to use a pronoun that you weren't comfortable with? Like, what was it about the
Yeah.
pronouns that is so troubling for you? And they were like, no, but I just don't believe that the church, as a man of God, I don't believe that I should be not calling somebody by a gender other than what they were. How do we crack that nut? Because if we don't crack that nut, and it's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in my opinion, but if we don't crack that and figure out a way out of that, all the potential healing, beauty, opportunity, growth, expansion, sustainability that could be our destiny will continue to be elusive, as if we were the children of Israel wandering in the desert for 40 years because we doubted God's ability to help us engage in the type of conquest that God promised the children of Israel. How does that land for you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the parts of me that were shaped by being the grandson of a Black Baptist minister in Austin, Texas, are admitting and affirming. I want to do three things, which is step back and recenter. There is a
Okay.
minority within the Black liberation tradition that embraces white mediocrity, that bastardizes religion to their benefit often. And these are the folks that are often given megaphones by white evangelicals, those who get tax benefits to go to Africa and peddle the same white mediocrity, such that we don't all get free. This is about folks who don't understand that they are being used by masters so that we don't have to have overseers because they're doing that work. One. Two, there are and have been Black spiritual leaders who understand the tradition of James Comer and others. The Jesus I know always showed up for the least of us. The least of these literally showed up in relationship with people who the community said you should not engage with them because of this stigma, this socially imposed stigma, this thing that if we listen to false prophets, they'll have us believing will get us closer to salvation. But if we read all of the stories and not just the clobber passages, we'll understand that we got to get free together. So I also want to offer up in this moment this book by Colby Martin. It's called Unclobber, Rethinking Our Misuse of the Bible and Homosexuality. What I often found interesting is that when people wanted to quote Bible, they would often quote scripture without context. They would often quote scripture without context. So when they want to be condemning, folks because of their sexual orientation and identity without regard for anybody else's sin, they're going to go to Sodom and Gomorrah. They'll go to Sodom and Gomorrah and tell a story that they have heard somebody tell them over time, often without the ability to recite the words that are on the page, but the context within which it was written. And so I want people to, again, I'm not going to get into arguing Bible with folks. What I will tell you is that story was about xenophobia and the dangers of us not leaning into community. It was not about sex in the way in which we understand homosexuality. There's another book by Kelly Brown Douglas, Sexuality in the Black Church, which for me is really instructive in offering examples of all of the ways in which our inability to show up like the Lord that we profess has caused harm to all of us. So if anybody is connected to or affected by, which is most of us, especially Black people, someone who has lived with or been affected by HIV, we got the Black church to blame. Our silence around supporting one another and leaning into community because of things that white mediocrity tells us means that we have ourselves to blame. And I was looking for another book by Dr. Comer. I can cite the books, but want to land in the space of just naming the hypocrisy. To go back to where we started with the transness of it all, and a part of the population that I care most about, which is our babies. I like data points, 700%. Less than 1% of the total population that we know of is trans, so a fraction of that percent is trans children. But what we know is that there's been a 700% increase in calls for help based on suicidal ideation because of introduction or codification of these policies. 700% increase. Hold that for a second. Again, those are babies. Beyond that, even before this most recent legislative cycle, which has been the deadliest on record, more than 600 anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation introduced across every state in this country. There's not a single place where you can't go. And the vast majority of it affects children who didn't ask to be born and who don't have the ability to consent to these conditions that are affecting their lives in intimate ways. And for Black folks who claim to love the Lord, to appreciate that children don't ask to be born and to celebrate that all children are a blessing, no matter how they come unto being, to then stand under a white man's sermon to cast out children with no fault of their own and then claim a relationship with the Lord is the definition of hypocrisy. And I would just rather you say you care about your own self and have bought the white lie that proximity to whiteness will save you. Beloved, it won't. That ain't never been our experience. Ask Byron Donaldson how that's working out for him. Ask Candace how that's working out for her. Ask Omarosa how that's, the grift only goes so far, beloved, they will hang you too. And if we can't figure out a way to do this work for children, just sit down, beloved, and let those of us who understand the work do the work.
That's right. My compassion meter for people who sit in judgment more than they can sit in love has expired. We've reached the full extent. And that Fannie Lou Hamer quote, "Until I'm free, ain't none of y'all gonna be free." Like that to me really encapsulates where we are, because she, an ancestor, said it. Sabonfu Somé talks to us in that, as do many other scholars, about the important role that members of the LGBTQIA community play. And the reality is, I hate appealing to heterosexual people to care about the gay community or the same gender loving community. I prefer to use your term. I hate to say, I hate to make it utilitarian. I hate to say you should care about what's happening to the trans community, because once they get done with the trans community, they're coming for you. But I recognize that people are inherently selfish, and particularly in this society, we have been trained to care more for ourselves than anything else in ways that are really diabolical and will allow us to gleefully celebrate someone else being sacrificed, so long as it means that harm is not coming to us. And I just feel as though, as a result of the thing that happened in early November, the great unraveling, we are now, those of us who talk about my ancestors' wildest dream, I feel like the ancestors are standing there with their arms folded like, really? You really thought our wildest dream was for you to integrate into this society that devastated us, that destroyed us? We wanted to go home. We did not want to have descendants who were trying to emulate the master. And I feel as though until we get to the point where we recognize that being willing to sacrifice the same gender loving family and friends that we have in our community, being willing to sacrifice them so that we can sit in judgment, is very similar to to how it is that the lowest white man, so long as you give them the black man to stand on top of, they will happily give your pockets to pick. We are occupying that space. I don't want to be the lowest white man in the black community. If that makes sense, I don't want to be the Klan in the black community. I don't want us to embody the same sorts of models that we have seen in white spaces that have been used to oppress black people. I don't want us to mimic that in our space. And so I don't know if you can give us, as we're sort of approaching this new era, and I believe that this is going to be a time, we finna have a time, Dr. David Giles, we finna have a time. If you can just talk with us and just give us your sense as to what we should be as a collective, same gender loving, different gender loving, everything in between and beyond, as a collective, what is going to be necessary in this new era for us to figure out a path towards getting everything that you just said? Because I feel like some of us are there, some of us think we're there, we're trying to get there, and others of us are just sort of, nah, that ain't what I'm trying to be. How can we figure out a way to reconcile the fact that there are so many strongly, rigidly held beliefs that are fundamentally flawed? I heard someone say the other day, if you have a belief that you can't explain where you got it or how or what it's based on, that's not your belief, that's someone else's indoctrination. How can we move past this sort of impasse that we seem to be in? Or is it simply a matter of we're going to have to leave some folks behind? And I don't know what the answer to that is. I'm curious as to your thoughts.
I'll tell you what I'm doing in this moment, which are three things. I offer them in the spirit that I hope people find parts of it that are helpful. Again, I'm offering them up while working through them. One is securing my oxygen mask first. And I want to say this to you, my sister, the way that I heard it from Dr. Raquel Martin, who joined me on my Teach the Babies podcast. She said that you should not only take off the cape, but to burn it, because our inclination is to take it off for a moment. And then as soon as somebody else needs something, we go back to the visceral response of helping them. And so in this moment where I recognize the literal and physical threats formed against me, given the work that I have been purposed to do, I am working to make sure that I am as fortified as possible. I hope this is not a non sequitur, but I recently fell in love with the documentary, Martha Stewart's documentary. She was done so dirty. And I hope that anyone who has convinced themselves that everything that we've been talking about is not true, and what they have been wanting in supporting Donald John Trump or Ronald Deion DeSantis or any of these other fascists, is this idea that they can become them and mutate into their benefits of whiteness in ways that don't exist. Watch what happened to a white woman who built a table in the house that they built, and how they attacked her. The part that I'm holding on to is Martha Stewart talking about the importance of building anew, of experiencing the trauma of taking the blows, of going through it, and taking the lessons such that we can adjust. And a part of what she did was continue to center the things that she knew were important for her and continue to move through. So the first part is securing my own oxygen mask, being loved on by those I love, and holding space with Black people who love other Black people. The second part is resisting the urge to go inward. I know in this moment, especially in this time of holiday gathering and cheer, there's so many people who just don't want to do it, who don't want to offer themselves up for the chance to be in some space where somebody is going to reveal who they are, and it might offer them up to a moment of violence. That spirit lives in me. I'm from Kendrick Lamar, LA all day, right? But what I know in this moment, what the ancestors are telling me, is that is not how we get closer to freedom. We are required to be in community with those who have harmed us knowingly and unknowingly, so that they can experience what they've done to us, so that we alone are not carrying the trauma and the pain, such that even if they don't say it or name it or acknowledge it to us, they also will be changed.
Wow.
Part of that for me is engaging in focus group conversations, me leveraging these tools that I didn't inherit from places trying to use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. Even though Audrey said that won't work, but it's engaging in conversations with people to check the things that I believe that are right, to ask about what I may be hearing wrong, and to ensure that the work that I'm doing is aligned with the needs of the people that I'm working on behalf of. And then the last thing is being clearest about how I can show up and add value. A part of what I'm hoping that the first two parts of what I've shared will allow me to do is have more tough conversations with people who don't think that my humanity is worth fighting for.